A reading from the book of Deuteronomy. Moses spoke to all the people, saying, "A prophet like me will the Lord your God raise up for you from among your own kin. To him you shall listen. This is exactly what you requested of the Lord your God at Horeb on the day of the assembly, when you said, 'Let us not again hear the voice of the Lord our God, not see this great fire anymore, lest we die.' And the Lord said to me, 'This was well said. I will raise up for them a prophet like you from among their kin, and will put my words into his mouth. He shall tell them all that I command him. Whoever will not listen to my words, which he speaks in my name, I myself will make him answer for it. But if a prophet presumes to speak in my name, an oracle that I have not commanded him to speak, or speaks in the name of other gods, he shall die." The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
If today you hear his voice, A reading from the first letter of St. Paul to the Corinthians. Brothers and sisters, I should like you to be free of anxieties. An unmarried man is anxious about the things of the Lord, how he may please the Lord. But a married man is anxious about the things of the world, how he may please his wife, and he is divided. An unmarried woman, or a virgin, is anxious about the things of the Lord, so that she may be holy in both body and spirit. A married woman, on the other hand, is anxious about the things of the world, how she may please her husband. I am telling you this for your own benefit, not to impose a restraint upon you, but for the sake of propriety and adherence to the Lord without distraction. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. Then they came to Capernaum, and on the Sabbath Jesus entered the synagogue and taught. The people were astonished at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority and not as the scribes. In their synagogue was a man with an unclean spirit. He cried out, "What do you have to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." Jesus rebuked him and said, "Quiet, come out of him." The unclean spirit convulsed him, and with a loud cry came out of him. All were amazed and asked one another, "What is this?" A new teaching with authority. He commands even the unclean spirits, and they obey him. His fame spread everywhere throughout the whole region of Galilee. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Happy fourth Sunday of Ordinary Time. How are we doing? Okay. Today we hear again from the first chapter of Mark. What have you come to do with us? Have you come to destroy us? These are the first questions posed to Jesus in his ministry. In a worldly sense, Jesus didn't have any power at all. He wasn't a worldly king with political or military power. He was not of the priests. He was not even a scribe with the authority of Jewish tradition. The only authority he had was a supreme confidence that what he said and what he did was God's will and God's truth. His authority was from the sheer power of his words and the example of his deeds. His power came from the fact that he spoke with his own voice. It came from the fact that he talked out of experience. And as we heard in the gospel today, at that time, no scribe expressed an opinion of his own. Jesus began by doing. Only then did he start to teach. The most effective messenger is one who lives the message. Jesus' authority was from living as God's servant. Jesus uses his authority not to obtain power for himself, but to serve humanity. Today's gospel is as much about calling forth and being inclusive as it is about casting out something that was undesirable. They can be two sides of the same coin if performed with justice and performed with mercy. What do you have to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? The man with the unclean spirit senses the distance between his life and Jesus. He speaks out, not only for himself, but by using the word us, is also for all the people in the synagogue that day. He represents everyone who's experienced the brokenness of life. He's a spokesperson for all who feel disconnected from themselves, disconnected from community, and disconnected from God. What he does is he represents a human condition. And behind his question, I believe, is the unspoken longing and the unspoken hope that Jesus would say, everything, I have everything to do with you. The encounter with this man has to do with the purity teachings of the Jewish faith. This is a favorite topic of the scribes because we hear it throughout all the Gospels. In the time of Jesus, it was believed you had to stay pure to remain in God's good graces. The Jewish purity law was built around a system that elevated the most pure, but it reviled the most impure. And the deck was kind of stacked, to be honest with you. One's purity depended on their birth, on their lineage. It depended on their behavior. Those who carefully obeyed these purity laws were regarded as more pure than those who ignored them. The people that downplayed them and disobeyed these laws, for whatever reason, even if it was no fault of theirs, they were considered outcasts. Physical wholeness was also part of the purity issue. People who were not whole, those that were maimed, those that were disfigured, those that were chronically ill, they were considered impure. Also, not of their own fault, people that were objectively poor or impoverished also were considered impure. And finally, Jews were considered more pure than the Gentiles. Individuals, they were holy to the degree that they kept their distance, what was perceived as unholy. And today's gospel, Jesus crosses that boundary between clean and unclean. This boundary had become a division, and this division had led to exclusion. Jesus represents God's loving outreach to those whom society, in the name of holiness, had pushed away. And now Jesus, in the name of holiness, was drawing them back. The man who created the scene, in effect, was saying what we ourselves have experienced in our own life. Leave us alone. We're no good. We're not worthy of your love and care. Whether these people were possessed by demons, we don't know. But we do know that they were those that were the invisible. We do know that they were those that lived on the margins. They were those that were sick. They were those that were broken. They were those that were isolated. They were the unloved, the ones who had no dignity and zero self-esteem. Today, as we sit in our house of worship, ask yourself, what is your demon? Is there a habit? Is there a sin? Or is there a fear that plagues you, that compromises your courage, that causes you great fear? What has you beaten down? What has you enslaved? We should not be ashamed. My mentor, Father Dan Danielson, used to tell me constantly, we are a church of sinners. And in today's gospel, Mark helps us understand that Jesus stands ready to help cast aside what binds us, what constricts us, and what brings us pain. Jesus stands ready to confront and defeat the demons that keep us from becoming the best versions of ourselves. The man in the synagogue, he didn't hide who he was. He voiced his anguish in public. There is no such thing as a totally self-sufficient individual. We are all remarkably dependent upon each other. We are community. We must drop our defenses and admit that the vulnerable, needy human beings that we really are need our help and God's help. The greatest thing we can give God is a receptive heart. It is in our brokenness, it is in our woundedness that God heals, if we give him the chance. Jesus was the embodiment of what he preached. He backed up his words with deeds. Every page of the gospel, it bears witness to this. His teachings, they enlighten the mind. His teachings nourish the spirit. His teachings set hearts on fire. The words of Jesus, they've echoed down from the centuries, and they bring light to those that are in darkness, and they bring hope to those that are in despair. Today, despite how we may feel about ourselves, you are never too far gone. All of us are worthy of God's care. All of us are worthy of God's grace. All of us are worthy of God's love. All of us are worthy of God's forgiveness. And yes, my brothers and sisters, all of us are worthy of God's mercy, if we would only ask.